For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal. Sri Lanka, one of India's closest neighbors, has been going through a turmoil because of its financial problems and political issues that it has faced over the past 3 months. With the election of Ranil Wickremesinghe as the 8th executive president of Sri Lanka last week, there is hope that Sri Lanka will come out of this mess. How will it do it? What is the path to recovery? And what led to the current mess is something that I'm going to speak about on this episode of Ask Nitin. I'm Nitin Gokhale. So let's look at what has happened in Sri Lanka in the past 3 months since April. Around the 9th or 10th of April, the people spontaneously gathered opposite the presidential palace in Colombo to start what it called Gota Home or Gota Go Home agitation to ask the then president Gotabaya Rajapaksa to step down from his position as the president of Sri Lanka, because the island nation was suffering economically. It had run out of foreign exchange reserves. It had defaulted on its sovereign payments and loans. And there was hardly any money to buy petroleum products, essential medicines, or even food or fertilizers for the people of the island. And the financial hardships that the people faced were unprecedented in Sri Lanka's history. Now, we have spoken a number of times on StratNewsGlobal. There have been various programs in which we have said why this situation has occurred. There have been issues about reckless borrowing that the Sri Lankan governments over a long period of time from 2002 onwards had done. They had initially taken IMF help, then they took the money from countries like China, Japan, and also towards the turn of the first decade of this century, around 2010-11, it started borrowing from commercial markets, private equities and private money lenders. Their rates of interest were higher. What is called the international sovereign bonds were bought in large numbers. They bought Sri Lanka's debt. So that time it was easy to tide over the crisis on a short-term basis. But as the years went by and as the interest started accumulating, the difficulty for Sri Lanka to repay those loans became more and more accentuated, more and more pronounced as far as the Sri Lankan financial situation was concerned. And therefore, the country kept on digging deep into its foreign exchange reserves, which were in any case low. And by the time they realized that they were running out of foreign exchange, the COVID hit in early 2020. The pandemic meant that the enforced lockdowns, and very strict lockdowns were enforced by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his team, in which two main foreign exchange earners or the verticals which earned huge foreign exchange for the country, main foreign exchange for the country, dried up, the business dried up. So that one was tourism, where a lot of foreigners used to come to Sri Lanka and spend their dollars in tourism, in exploring the country. They stopped completely. Second was the remittances from the Sri Lankan expatriates settled all over the globe, Australia, West Europe, Canada, North America, all those places. They also, or in the Gulf countries in West Asia, they also started coming back home because either they lost their jobs or they faced pay cuts. So their remittances, what they used to send home, the money for Sri Lanka, also started drying up. At the same time, around 2018-2020, the repayment became due of the international sovereign bonds for Sri Lanka. All in all, it was double whammy. Then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa made two mistakes. One, as soon as he came to power in November 2019, in order to fulfill his own election promise, he cut down the value-added tax for most Sri Lankans by half. Again, reducing the revenue generation for the Sri Lankan state. And then he banned abruptly the import of chemical fertilizers for the agricultural sector. He wanted the organic farming to be adopted by the Sri Lankan agriculturists, but the abrupt change was not something that the sector could take, and the productivity dropped by more than half as far as the farmers in Sri Lanka was concerned. So all in all, it was more than double whammy for Sri Lanka. Its foreign exchange earnings dropped, the demand for repayment of the loans came there, and there was nobody to help them. China, which used to give them cheap loans or grants, completely withdrew. It was only India which gave whatever money it could afford to give, and that was not insubstantial. 3.8 billion, nearly $4 billion in help to Sri Lanka in the past 6 months, compared to less than 80 million given by China. That is something one must remember. I hope the Sri Lankans will remember. But having done all that, the people were not satisfied. They were unhappy with Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his brothers, who they held responsible for the current mess. Although it was a long-term problem, looked at it holistically. And they were, of course, the victims, because they were in these 20 years ruling for nearly 13 to 14 years. So therefore, the Rajapaksas had to take the blame. The people gathered in large numbers spontaneously from April 9 onwards, but on July 9th, they overran the presidential palace, the presidential office, the Prime Minister's office. They burned down Ranil Wickremesinghe's personal home, and it seemed that there was a Arab Spring kind of a situation in Sri Lanka, where the president had to leave the country. He in fact left the island nation on 11th of July, first going to Maldives and then going to Singapore, fleeing in ignominy because he couldn't control the situation. And it seemed that Sri Lanka had no other way but to go down as a failed state. And it seems that the path to recovery is still very difficult. But on Wednesday, Ranil Wickremesinghe, who's been a survivor in Sri Lankan politics, has been the Prime Minister of the country for 6 times previously, but never its president, has finally become the president because the parliament had to vote to elect a new president. He was already an acting president appointed by the parliament and by Gotabaya Rajapaksa before he resigned. So during the voting, Ranil Wickremesinghe, as I said, a seasoned politician, got 134 votes, as you know, and his nearest rival got less than 3 figures. So now finally Ranil Wickremesinghe, well-connected politician who's well regarded in the Western capitals, also has good ties with China, and of course knows India very well, is now the president. And the onerous task of recovering the Sri Lankan economy or bringing it back on the rails is now on the heads, on the shoulders of, on the head of Ranil Wickremesinghe, on his shoulders. And therefore, we'll have to wait and watch how he manages, because Sri Lanka has to now negotiate a very difficult bailout package from the International Monetary Fund, which will impose very hard conditions, very tough conditions for Sri Lanka to manage its economy. That is in the future, in the next 2-3 months. Till then, it has to survive. Some payments have been made for fuel, for medicine. India continues to help. But going beyond this, like one of my friends and analyst on Sri Lankan situation said the other day, Sri Lankans as a nation, as a people, have to unite and have to make sacrifices. Everyone will have to make sacrifices to make Sri Lanka a country that is on a path of prosperity, because it does not have too many sources of revenue except for tourism and maybe small industries, tea, and also remittances coming from abroad. How Sri Lanka will cope with this and how long will it take, nobody knows. But that's where we are, and I thought I will give you a rundown of what has happened. I've been an avid Sri Lanka watcher for some time, And that is something that one really sees as a very unfortunate turn of events in Sri Lanka. But there is hope. There is always hope, especially when resilient people come out of situations of conflict and ethnic divide and war, as Sri Lanka has done since 2009-10. So hopefully, situation in Sri Lanka will turn out to be better in coming months and years. But at the moment, the island nation is in big trouble. Where does it go from here is something that we'll have to wait and watch. Okay, so as we do in this program, you've seen in the past two editions, we have people joining us live with their questions, their queries, their comments. And I have the first question coming up from Rishabh, who I'm sure has a lot of observations on what I said and how he watches Sri Lanka. Please go ahead. Please introduce yourself briefly and then ask your question.
Yes, sir. My name is Rishav Gupta. I'm a first year student from the Symbiosis School of International Studies. My query is what has been the reason of China's wait and watch approach towards the Sri Lankan and economic crisis, because only few hours back, after the new president was actually reinstated, did Xi Jinping make a call to him? So actually, what is the reason for this is sort of actually approach from China towards the crisis?
Very good question. I think you've been very perceptive, Rishabh, because China has been adopting the policy of hands-off approach to Sri Lanka in the past 3 or 4 months since the trouble began. Clearly, China does not want to be fishing in troubled waters in that sense, but it also is known to fish in troubled waters in Sri Lanka. It has actually added to Sri Lanka's difficulties by giving cheap loans, but also making it habitual to the kind of cheap loans and grants. But in this case, they were not sure which way it was going, whether President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had control over the country or its administration, and they did not want their money to sink in or money to go waste as they assessed, and therefore perhaps they just kept themselves away. They also realized that there's a lot of resentment against China because of its debt debt trap policy, and they did not want to be a target of the Sri Lankan people's anger. That's why they kept away. And of course, the final point and the main important point here is that the Chinese don't like any country that they've given loans to go to the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, because then the books are scrutinized by the economists of the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, and then their secrets, who have they paid off, how much bribe have they given to who, whether they inflated the budget and sort of took away money from that particular country, all gets exposed. So that is why the Sri Lankans realize that the Chinese are keeping away from the trouble or hands-off approach on the island nation during the trouble. I hope I have answered your question.
Thanks. That makes it quite clear. Thanks a lot, sir.
Right. Pleasure. So let's go to the next question. We have the other participant joining us, and he obviously has a couple of questions to ask us on this particular program. Go ahead, introduce yourself and go ahead, please.
Good morning, Nitin sir. I'm Christy, and my question to you is: as the saying goes, things get worse before they get better. How long does Ranil Wickremesinghe have to fix Sri Lanka's economy?
Good question, and I don't think anybody has a clear answer to this, really. But remember that the IMF loan is not going to come through for at least another 6 months. So first he has to stabilize the current state of affairs as far as the economy is concerned and the law and order situation. So the first 6 months he'll have to spend in trying to get the country back on its rails, somehow convince people that the bailout package is round the corner, So some sacrifices have to be made by everyone. Rationing has started on fuel, rationing on food has started. So he has these 6 months to get the people's confidence back in the administration and the governance structure. After that, depending on how much bailout package the IMF gives to Sri Lanka and what are the conditions it imposes on Sri Lanka, then it might take up to 2 years, 3 years for the country to recover from the current financial mess. Whether Ranil Wickremesinghe will survive that long or whether there will be fresh elections ordered, can Sri Lanka afford those elections, all the questions that are going to be there in the future. As I see it in the short term, it's going to be 3 to 4 months or 6 months for Sri Lanka to get back on the rails, the economy and the law and order situation or the governance, and then wait for the IMF package to come in so that it can start rebuilding the country's economy by attracting more tourists, more investment, more remittances by people who have now leaving for jobs abroad or who are already in jobs abroad. All that will have to come together for Sri Lanka to recover. I hope I have answered your question. You have another question, I was told.
Okay, so I would like to ask, what should be India's approach to a civil matter in a sovereign country?
Well, India has made it clear time and again that it does not interfere, it does not like to interfere in any other country's internal matter. And all the aid and assistance that India is giving to Sri Lanka is purely on humanitarian ground and because of good relations and common heritage and civilizational ties that India has with Sri Lanka. So I think that approach is very clear that India does not interfere in the internal matters of other countries. And that is the approach which has been consistent for the last 75 years. We have tried keeping ourselves out of any local politics. And if you saw India's statements in the past 10 days or 15 days, India has always said that they are with the people of Sri Lanka and not with any particular politician or a political party. I think that sums up India's approach there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me, both of you. In fact, there could be more questions, but the issue is that the program shouldn't stretch beyond a certain point, and I hope we have been able to give you a glimpse of what's gone wrong in Sri Lanka and where is it headed going forward. It is a difficult task. It's an uphill journey for Sri Lanka in the next 1 year or so, but hopefully with India's assistance, with the help from the IMF and the hard work of the people of Sri Lanka, it will get back to its earlier self, being a vibrant country, very welcoming country. The people are very warm and hospitable, and therefore what we need to watch is how people now come together to sacrifice or to sort of give up some of their own requirements so that the country progresses going forward is what we'll have to look at. That's all I have in this episode of Ask Nitin. Do keep watching StratNewsGlobal and of course Ask Nitin every Saturday. Please send your feedback, your questions, comments. I would like more and more people to join this program live so that you have a chance to appear on screen with me and ask questions like on the screen and get your curiosity satisfied. That's the way this program has been designed. You know where to reach us on our social media platforms. Do follow us and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to all our social media handles, which gives us encouragement to do more and more for you. Our viewers are our mainstay, and the entire program is designed to be informative, to be educative, and to satisfy your curiosity. Until the next time, it's goodbye.